الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to lecture 7 in our series on Usul al-Tafsir. And today's topic will be the Makkan and Madeenan verses. And our first order of business is talking about the categorization schemes for what is meant by Makkan and Madeenan verses. Obviously, Mecca and Medina are two places, and there is an opinion that what these two categories refer to is verses that were revealed in Mecca are Meccan verses, and verses that were revealed in Medina are Medinan verses. And this is not a very useful way of looking at the concept, because there are verses that were revealed in places other than Mecca and Medina. For instance, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلَوْ كَانَ عَرَضًا قَرِيبًا وَسَفَرًا قَاصِدًا لَاتَّبَعُوكَ, from Surah At-Tawbah, verse 42. Had it been a near adventure and an easy journey, they would have followed you. So this categorization scheme would then end up having not just two categories, but many, many categories based on places where verses were revealed. A second suggestion was that Meccan verses were addressed to the people of Mecca. Medinan verses were addressed to the people of Medina. And you can tell the difference because Ayyuhan Nas, or Ya Ayyuhan Nas, O people, that refers to the Meccans. And Ya Ayyuhal Ladina Amanu, O you believe, refers to, it's addressing the people of Medina. However, there are verses like verse 21 from Surah Al-Baqarah, يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. That verse is addressing the people, and it was revealed in Medina. And likewise, the first verse in Surah An-Nisa, يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. O mankind, be careful of your duty to your Lord, who created you from a single soul, and from it created its mate, etc., to the end of the verse. So those are both verses that were revealed in Medina, and they are addressed to the people. Another objection to that classification scheme is that there are many verses that are addressed specifically to the Prophet ﷺ. So that requires some other category. Anyway, those are just preliminaries. The vast majority of scholars down through the ages have concurred with the idea that Meccan verses were revealed before the Hijrah and Medinan verses were revealed after the Hijrah. So the criterion here is time, not place. And that's really the most useful categorization scheme for the purposes of tafsir. Because before the Hijrah, of course, the Muslims were a minority, an embattled minority in a hostile society. And in Medina, they were a community and a state. And so the whole nature of the project of Islam, it took on a completely different character in Medina than it had in Mecca. And so you have verses like أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. that's considered to be a Medinan verse, even though it was revealed in Arafat, because it was on the occasion of the farewell pilgrimage. So that's long after the Hijrah. And you have a verse like from Surah An-Nisa, verse 58, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا. Indeed, Allah commands you that you restore deposits to their owners. That verse was revealed inside the Kaaba, and it's a Medinan verse. Surah Al-Anfal is a Medinan verse, even though some parts of it were revealed at Badr, like that. Now, it should be noted that there's a reference to Makkan soorahs and Madeenan soorahs, and that's talking about the majority of the surah. And you will find some Makkan surahs that have Medinan verses inside them, and vice versa. Now, what are the benefits of this knowledge? Well, first of all, and this is really important for the purposes of dawah, if we understand what verses were revealed in Mecca, then the address to the believers in Mecca is munasib. It's appropriate for a certain stage of the dawah. So in Mecca, there were few believers. They were a minority. Islam was new to the people, and so the issues that were being dealt with were different from the issues of Medina. And so this whole idea of looking around at the world we live in and saying, this group of people in this time, what stage have they reached in receiving and imbibing the message of Islam? And based upon that, you have broad outlines of how to approach the target audience in any particular context. And so knowing how the Meccans were approached by the revelation, and how the Medinan society was approached by the revelation, this is very important for the purposes of tailoring the dawah to meet the target audience. And some scholars have gone so far. One of my teachers here in Malaysia, he posited the idea that it's not just Makkan and Madeenan, but you can actually analyze it on a year-by-year basis and put different societies and groups on a spectrum based upon how much of the message they have absorbed and how much that message has affected the society as a whole. And then based on that, you have various approaches to what's next, what's the agenda at this point for these people. You can take that or leave that as you will, but it's something to think about. Also, appreciation of the difference between Makkan and Madeenan verses has a big impact on fiqh. First of all, the fact that there was a big emphasis on issues of belief, and obligations were very general in the Makkan period. And gradually, rules began to be put in place. And this incremental process of legislation, it has an implication then for the fiqh of a given situation. And one of the really important issues is the fiqh of minorities. Now, about 1/4 of all the Muslims in the world live as minorities in societies where the majority of people are not Muslims, and political authority is in the hands of those non-Muslims. So their situation resembles, to some degree or another, that of the people of Mecca, or you could even say some of them they're not living under oppression per se, so their situation is more consistent with that of the Muslims in Abyssinia. However, the basic breakdown is Makkan and Madeenan, and the Makkan era has lots of implications for the fiqh of minorities in particular. And also, when you have societies like Muslim majority societies in which Islam has been displaced to one degree or another from being the guiding force of the society, then how do you put the pieces back together again? So, again, gradualism is part of the process. You can't do it overnight. Now, I remember one fellow student when I was in Medina, a Westerner, who was a Zahiri. He had become enamored of the Zahiri madhab. So he took issue with this whole categorization scheme. He said, well, what are you going to say? That you're in a Meccan period now, so there's no such thing as Salatul Jumu'ah, and there's no such thing as zakat as we know it now, and there's no such thing. He was running down a list of things that were legislated in Medina. So if you say we're in a Meccan period, then what? You don't do any of those things. But, of course, nobody's saying that. But there are certain things which require the society as a whole to be to have accepted that the Sharia should be the guide for the way we live our lives. And if that's not accepted in a society, then some of those things are very difficult to implement. So, this is the whole idea of fiqh is not something that is a cookbook recipe. You take 1 cup of flour, 1 pinch of salt, and 3 eggs, and you mix them together, and you've got something, pancakes. And that's the way fiqh works. Every situation is different, and it needs to be dealt with regard to general principles and specific rules. And it's a very complex process. It's not an off-the-shelf answer, one-size-fits-all process. One of the points that's also mentioned with regard to Makkan and Madeenan verses is that it helps to know what's been mansukh, abrogated, and what is nasikh. So, obviously, one of the definitions of or conditions of nasikh is that the abrogating evidence must be historically later than the abrogated. So, knowing what's a Meccan verse and a Medinan verse gives you a broad understanding of historical sequence. Obviously, that's only a starting point, but That's something.